because of time, you see, as briefly as possible.
The first point I'd like to make is that being at the table is not about presence. It's more than that. If you sit at the table, you are blindfolded, you are dumb, and so on, you are not at the table. Being at the table is about power. It's about power relations. You take the United Nations. Why? We go to the General Assembly every September, our heads of state make speeches and so on. No matter what they say, one country in the world has a veto power and it can stop it. That is not presence. That is not presence. So, yes, we need to be at the table, and if we need to be at the table, we need to be at the table so we can make an impact, so our voices can be heard, so we can influence the cause of the world. That is what being at the table means. Now, the other question which has come up is that why is reparation necessary? You see, it depends on how you think about reparation. If you think about reparation as resetting the world, then it is more than necessary. We need to change this world. We need to construct a new world. We need to build a new world in which all people are equal. We need to build a new world in which the exploitation of our resources comes to an end. Now, you take every and any African country, you take Ghana, and you look at our maps, the story is told simply by looking at the railway lines. Have you seen the railway maps? All of the railway lines start from the areas of the concentration of wealth, where we mine gold, diamond, manganese, where there's timber and so on. Where do they end up? They end up in the port. This is 60, 70 years after independence. So even national infrastructure needs to change. And changing national infrastructure and the mentality behind national infrastructure is part of the reparative process. Now, when we talk about reparation, we always talk as if we are going to get something from somewhere. We are not getting anything from anybody. We are taking what belongs to us. That is what reparation should be. It's a struggle, it's a fight, it's a battle. We are fighting to take what belongs to us. We are not recipients. And we are not going to justify why we need to change the world which was built on slave mentality. We are not going to beg anybody to understand why, after years of colonialism, we want to reset the world. Whether they understand or not is their business. 1.4 billion people on this continent and in the diaspora need to build a new world which answers to their development needs and aspirations. And there can be no compromise on this matter. Finish.
Thank you. No compromise. Reparations, the AU. As political leaders of Africa, what do you see as some of the challenges that they may be facing and which may be translating into what some may say is the relatively slow pace at which the reparations agenda is being dealt with? Because Kwame Nkrumah spoke about it 50 years ago. There have been many discussions in AU circles, but it looks as if we are not really as close to our destination as possible. Just the political, and of course, because you are in the media as well, if there are some other media dimensions you'd like to add to that, please. Kwesi.
First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for this opportunity to participate in this very crucial discussion about the past, the present, and future of Africa. I'd like to say first and foremost that the main challenge facing us as Africans on the continent and the diaspora is the challenge of definition. When we talk about reparation, what is it that we are talking about? And many people have thought that the struggle for reparation is about the struggle for compensation, the struggle for money, and so on. let me start off by making the point clear that no amount of money can pay for what we have been through as a people. What we are asking for is a reset of the world. The entire world needs to be reset. And the entire world needs to be reset because the world as we know it today was created, was put together block by block in order to put us in a position of disadvantage. One can explain today when 1.4 billion Africans have no meaningful voice in the United Nations. What is the explanation? How can that be justified? The only possible explanation is that in 1945, when these structures were being created, we were simply not there. We were seen as part of the colonial enterprise of Britain and so on. So we were not at the table when the UN was being created. We were not at the table where institutions of the UN, like the World Bank, the IMF, the World Trade Organization, and all of those were being created. We must insist on being at the table, and we must insist that these institutions serve African interests. That is part of the process of reparation. And I think it's also important to begin to consider history, because history as we know it today is not our story. It is the story of the plunderers, of the thieves, of the empire builders who created the conditions for underdevelopment today. And we must retell that history. It is because of the false history that we have learned that today some of our brothers and sisters in the diaspora can say, we are all guilty. After all, you sold us into slavery. This narrative is completely false. Why? You go to Britain, you go to France, you go to Germany, and so on. Some of the things on display are the heads of our heroes. The heads of our heroes are on display. How did they come by the heads of these heroes? These are the people who resisted the transatlantic slave trade. These are the people who resisted colonialism, who were killed, who were assassinated, and their heads taken as trophies and deposited in those countries and in their museums. The existence of those heads tells the story of our resistance, and our resistance was massive, it was fierce, and our resistance led not just to the abolition of the slave trade, but our resistance gave birth to concepts of Pan-Africanism. Our resistance gave birth to the Fifth Pan-African Congress in Manchester. Our resistance gave birth to the independence movement, and we will continue this struggle, this battle, until final victory. And what can final victory mean? Final victory can mean when we build a new world in which all of its citizens, irrespective of their color, their language, and their geography, are treated equally. That is one point of victory. The other point of victory is that we should be in a position to own our resources, exploit these resources for our own benefit, and make important decisions about ourselves. That's another part of the victory. The other part of the victory is that all of us, from every continent, all of us, in our different colors and languages, ought to be able to build that new world in which no child will go to bed on an empty stomach. That is our commitment. That is the purpose of reparation. The purpose of reparation is to ensure that African spirituality is not inferior to European spirituality. The purpose of reparation is to challenge the papal bull which was put out in 1452 by the Pope of the Catholic Church. The purpose of reparation is to undo the Berlin Conference of 1885, at which Otto von Bismarck and his colleagues from Europe broke our continent into countries without our consent. We were not at the table, and we cannot accept the current boundaries of Africa as legitimate boundaries, as boundaries which will determine our now and our tomorrow. There's a huge task ahead of us, and there's a struggle to be waged. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt. Always the wide thinker.
Hear ourselves. But I think I get the trend, I get where we are going, and I'm talking about Professor Kimani. I think it's Professor Kimani who raised the issue. Part of the question that Professor Kimani raises is that it is not only the Europeans who enslaved us. There were other nationalities which enslaved us, and so on. And perhaps why are we not focusing attention on all of our history of slavery and so on and so forth? I think that's a legitimate question, but there's a problem. We cannot assume today that the slavery, the colonialism and so on has come to an end. It has not come to an end. We are still being enslaved, we are still being colonized, our resources are still being stolen. So the first step is to stop it now. Stop it now as a first step towards going back, reviewing all that has happened, and ensuring that we can move forward into prosperity and equality. And today, I look around Africa, I look around the African world and so on, and what do I see? I don't see Arabs. I see capitalist states from the West. They are the people who are strangulating us. They are immediate target if you are to get justice. Now, one of the biggest harm that is being caused to the African people everywhere is the message that they've given us and which we have bought. The wrong message. We are being constantly told that if you are to develop as African people, if you are to resolve our problems as African people, we must follow the example of Britain, follow the example of Germany, follow the example of Holland, and follow the example of France. My brothers and sisters, I tell you from the bottom of my heart that to follow these examples is to head straight to doom. Those are not examples for us today. And why are they not examples for us today? We have to ask the question, how do they accumulate the surpluses which enable them to build their industries, to build their financial institutions and so on? They accumulated these surpluses through slavery, through colonialism, through stealing, plunder and so on. Today, if you ask us as Africans to follow the example of Britain, which country are we going to colonize? Which people are we going to enslave? Which resources are we going to steal? That option is not available to us as Africans. The option of enslaving others is not available to us. The option of stealing resources from other places is not available to us. The only option that is available to the African people for their development is collective self-reliance in a united Africa, guided by new principles of equity and of respect for each other. Colonialism, capitalism is not an option for the African people. And this is a story that our history tells very clearly. You know, many questions have been asked in the past, and I like to tell just one story, maybe two stories. There's the story of the African woman from Elimina, only a few kilometers from where we are today, sitting today, whose cat scratched her palm, scratched her, and developed into a sore and so on. And this African woman used African traditional medicine, spread African traditional medicine on her sore. She was captured, accused of witchcraft, tried in the Elmina castle, eventually was taken to Portugal for a trial for witchcraft. The lessons of this are clear. It was an attack on our medical science. It was an attack on indigenous knowledge. It is the reason, perhaps, why our medical science has not been able to develop to the level that we would have appreciated at all. You know, if you look at the human anatomy, okay, somehow African women are very well endowed in certain parts of their bodies, especially their posterior. Why? It is not our fault that European women are not that endowed. But they came to South Africa and saw a woman, and I think she's called Brenda or so, a woman, and this is well documented in history. And they saw her endowment in the posterior. What did they do? They captured this woman, took her to Europe, put her in a glass cage, and put her on exhibition. Can you imagine? They put her on exhibition. And out of humiliation and so on, she committed suicide. This is a crime against humanity, not just a crime against the African people and so on. Clear crime against humanity. You understand? Today, as we speak in this hall, why? We are constantly being reminded of the aid that is coming from the West. The aid is coming from the West. Some of our intellectuals and politicians are so stupid, excuse my language, so stupid that when they have to take actions to protect us, they point to the aid that is coming from the West and say, because of that aid, we cannot move. What is the reality? The reality is that for every dollar that the Western countries bring into Africa, they take out $24. For every dollar that they bring into Africa, they take away $24. Please let them keep their $1 and let us keep our $24 and see who will be better off. Amen. So the time has come for us to wake up, to change the narrative, to understand our history, and to apply those lessons of our history to today. Why? Ghana, this country, Ghana, the records say has gone to the IMF 18 times. Yep. And we went to the IMF so that our economy can improve. The records show that anytime you go to the IMF, our situation gets worse. Why are our leaders still trooping to the IMF? Why are our leaders still trooping to Washington to look for what? It was Einstein who said that if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and you expect a different result, you need a doctor to look at your brain. Perhaps it is time for our leaders to look for doctors to look at their brains.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Pratt. Again.
Thank you, Africa. Mama Africa. Oh, yeah. You make Africa great. Thank you, freedom. Thank you, Africa.